Here we go again. Honestly, I would have not expected you guys to be this excited about dead human species, but I'm happy that I get to keep making these videos because I'm legitimately getting smarter from researching this topic. I had no idea how to say Australopithecus before the first video in this series, and now look at me. I sound like I could host a lecture on ancient aliens. Hello, most amazing top 10 family. I'm your host, CEPRANENSIS, and for today's list, we are going to be counting down the top 10 scary extinct human species, Part 3. It has been a blast making these lists because if I wasn't doing this, I would be looking up how many push-ups Batman can do, and I'm still gonna look that up because I kind of want to know. Now, if you guys haven't seen Part 1 or 2, then you need to go check those out right now. You can't start at Part 3. That's absolutely insane. And make sure you stick around until the end of this list because I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts, which you guys love so much. Remember, if you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. And without taking any longer, let's get into this list. Coming in at number 10, we have HOMO GAUTENGENSIS. We are starting off with an ancestor that might have had a smaller brain than most of our other predecessors, but it seemed that this creature was quite resourceful. HOMO GAUTENGENSIS was a species that seemed to have the ability to use fire. It's unknown how it learned this skill. Maybe it was passed down from generation to generation, like we do with driving or watching American Idol. The way that scientists are able to make this assumption is from charred bones that were found along with the fossils of HOMO GAUTENGENSIS. This means that this prehistoric man was cooking its meat before it ate it. Imagine you were the first guy to cook food. You bring a girl over for a date and you're like, hey, you want some charred meat? You are for sure getting a second date. However, it seems from this ancestor's teeth that meat wasn't often on the menu. They had large flat teeth which are commonly associated with herbivores. It also seemed that HOMO GAUTENGENSIS lived mostly in trees. It might have come down occasionally to hunt or forage for food, but outside of that, trees are where this creature loved to live. Coming in at number 9, we have HOMO ERGASTER. Moving over to Africa now, there's a reason they call Africa the cradle of civilization. It seems that a lot of our ancestors have come from this place, and this is where a good chunk of HOMO ERGASTER's remains were found. HOMO ERGASTER was a transitional ancestor. It seemed to have a weaker bone structure compared to similar species. This would mean that HOMO ERGASTER had started moving into a lifestyle that was less dominated by physical conflict. There's also a lot of evidence that showed HOMO ERGASTER had a more advanced system of social interaction. I mean, they weren't sharing K-pop songs together, but they were gathering in large groups. Who knows what they could have been doing back then? I think it was probably beatbox battling. That's just my highly educated scientific opinion. You don't have to believe me, but I'm on part 3 of this series, so I think I would know. Coming in at number 8 is HOMO CEPRANENSIS. This extinct species is extremely interesting because there's so little known about it. Most of the time when a new species is discovered, there's a series of fossils that can be traced back to the same specimen. Sometimes there's even stone tools and evidence as to what their social system looked like. But with this guy, there's none of that. We don't have any info of this old school dude because the only thing that we found was just one skull. It was discovered back in 1994, and since then there has been no discoveries that could be linked back to this guy. It's a lone ranger. Now, how could a skull be found and there be nothing else? Well, there's a good chance that this bad boy was killed by something and then the skull was taken to another place and then just chucked on the ground after whatever was carrying it was done with it. It's kind of brutal, but back then skulls would have been ripped off of bodies all the time. It was the Stone Age, baby. People ripped your head off as a prank. Coming in at number 7, we have Homo sapien IDALTU. This might be one of our closest known ancestors that has died off. This dude was walking around 160,000 years ago, and in terms of life on this planet, that's not that long ago. They would have walked upright, and it seemed that most of them lived in northern Africa. The remains of this ancestor were found in Ethiopia. It's unknown why this species wasn't able to make it into the future with us. One of the fossils discovered had the best preserved skull of any extinct human species, so we have been able to learn a lot about the size of this people's brain and their eating habits. The brain was pretty close to the same size as our own, and it seemed like most of our ancestors, it fed primarily on a vegetarian diet. Coming in at number 6, we have KENNEWICK Man. What makes the discovery of KENNEWICK Man so interesting is that he's not that old. Now, this means that he is most likely a direct descendant and not an extinct species, but I wanted to include him on the list because I thought it was super cool. KENNEWICK Man was found off the coast of the Kennewick River in Colombia and holds a lot of similarities to other Native American people. He has similar bone structure and it's thought that he could have very similar DNA as well. When he was found, some information about his death was very fascinating. He didn't die from a tiger attack or old age. He had a spear lodged in his hip. That's a good way to die. So that means competing tribes in the area were duking it out over rule of land way back then, before we were even drawing lines about which nations belong to which people. It really makes you think about how long we've been fighting for, and how in some ways it's built into our DNA. Coming in number 5 are AUSTRALOPITHECUS RAMIDUS. These guys play a very important role in understanding where we come from. Better known as Ardi, these are some of the oldest known fossils that can be related to humans. This dude was most likely still covered head to toe in hair like a chimp. Now we would think that is super gross, but back then it was quite stylish. You were warm and comfy all the time. It was like having a free snuggie. They walked the earth about 4.5 million years ago in northern Africa. It's thought that the largest grouping of them would be in present-day Ethiopia. Now, why is Ardi so important to knowing more about our genome? Well, because Ardi was around at a pivotal moment in our development. 4.5 million years ago was when we were going through a transfer period, when we were going from walking around like an ape to sometimes on 2 legs. The question is, why did we change? Coming in at number 4 with PARANTHROPUS boisei. Now let's get a little closer to the modern age. Not that close though. This long lost ancestor was around 1.4 million years ago and was found throughout northern Africa. It's thought that they could have been one of the most dominant versions of humanoid for nearly 1 million years. That's not that bad of a track record. Hopefully we can pull off something similar. Something quite interesting about this ancestor is the mouth, jaw, and teeth, because they were freaking huge compared to a lot of other primates of that time. It's thought that they had a high-fat diet that consisted of nuts and hard shells. That is how they got the nickname Nutcracker. This species would use its strong jaws to crack open nut cases that other creatures couldn't get to. Being able to get to high-calorie foods might be why this ancestor was able to be so dominant for so long. Coming in at number 3, we have Sahelanthropus chadensis. Now we are going back in time. This species is a common ancestor for both chimpanzees and humans. It's estimated that this beast walked the earth about 7 million years ago, and it was at this point where our 2 species split. It would have been 2 separate groups of primates breaking off that made our 2 separate species. I think we got the better deal out of this split. Now, why did our species do so much better than chimpanzees? Well, it could have been nutrition or crossbreeding with other ancient species, but the story is still yet to be told. Coming at number 2 is Australopithecus GARHI. Alright, we're nearly at number 1, and this guy has locked down the number 2 spot because GARHI was the first known pre-Homo species to use stone tools. That's absolutely incredible. It's thought that they were not primarily used for hunting or combat, but mostly for butchering meat that had already been killed. They most likely walked the earth 2.5 million years ago. They had huge jaws and heads, but brains that weren't much larger than any other Australopithecus that could have existed around that time. It seems that the females of these species were quite large, which could mean that the males and females were the same size. Coming in at number 1 is Australopithecus AFARENSIS. Probably one of the best studied ancestors. The key to unlocking more knowledge about these dead species is fossils, and AFARENSIS is one of the species that we have the most fossils of. Through modern discoveries, we have been able to determine that these males were much larger than the females, and there was most likely a constant battle for dominance between males. They competed for land and mates. The females most likely gathered foods for their prehistoric tribes. It's fascinating what we have been able to discover, and when I say we, I mean people much smarter than me who can pronounce big science words. I'm just the messenger who read a few things on the internet. Alright everyone, that has been our list, and as promised, I'm going to be doing some more pet shoutouts. Remember, if you want me to shout out your pet, you can hit me up on Instagram. I pick new pets every day, so if you don't get picked one day, you can message back another day. If it takes me a little while to get back to you, I am very sorry. I have a lot of these to do. Without taking any longer, let's shout out some pets. First up, we have Thomas, who is refusing to let you do any work because it is clearly time for some cuddles. Then we have Coco, who wants to give you some love but simultaneously doesn't want to move at all. Then we have Charlie, who has 2 different colored eyes, which is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Then we have the extremely cute kittens Griselda and Benny, who are just playing around. And to close it out, we have this amazing collage of this dog who is clearly busy. They have so much to do. Alright everyone, that has been our list. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, I would love it if you could like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell. Until next time, I've been your host, CEPRANENSIS, and keep checking out all this crazy old school fossilized content. Bye. But I'm happy that I keep what makes the discovery of KENNEWICK Man so interesting is, and when I say we, I mean you.